At just 24 years old, John Travolta stood where most actors never reach, becoming the youngest performer ever nominated for a Best Actor Academy Award. Saturday Night Fever and Grease didn't merely succeed. Together, they earned more than $600 million and reshaped global pop culture. Travolta became unavoidable, his voice, walk, and smile echoing across radios, movie screens, and dance floors worldwide. Fame arrived with astonishing speed, leaving little room to breathe or prepare. The world saw confidence and glamour, but few understood how sudden that rise truly was. Today, at 71, Travolta lives quietly in Florida, surrounded by photographs that speak louder than applause ever did. The man who once made millions dance now exists in a stillness fame never warned him about. His story is not about losing relevance, but about what remains when the noise finally fades. Roots far from the spotlight. Long before disco lights and red carpets, John Travolta's world was a modest home in Inglewood, New Jersey. He was the youngest of 6 children in a working-class family, where money stretched thin, but imagination filled every corner. His father worked long hours selling tires, carrying the weight of responsibility quietly. His mother, Helen, was different. A former performer turned drama teacher, she transformed their living room into a stage. While others worried about survival, she taught belief. She made her youngest son feel seen before the world ever noticed him. That belief became his foundation. School wasn't kind, and fitting in never came easily, but home was safe. In that space, John learned that becoming someone else could be powerful. Those early lessons didn't promise fame, but they gave him something far more important: permission to dream when circumstances suggested he shouldn't. Belief that carried him forward. Helen Travolta didn't just encourage performance, she encouraged courage. She enrolled John in acting classes and community theatre, not to chase fame, but to give him confidence. He struggled with shyness and a speech impediment, often feeling invisible in school hallways. On stage, those limitations disappeared. He learned control, expression, and presence. Rejection came early and often, but belief softened its edges. Auditions failed, opportunities vanished. Some nights were spent couch surfing, wondering if the dream was foolish, but the idea that someone believed in him never faded. By his late teens, John made a decision that terrified his family. He left school and moved to New York City with little money and no safety net. What he carried instead was conviction. That conviction didn't guarantee success, but it kept him standing through years when quitting would have been the easier, smarter choice. Fame that exploded overnight. By 21, television changed everything. Welcome back. Cotter introduced John Travolta to millions of households almost overnight. The fame was immediate, intense, and overwhelming, but it was only the beginning. 2 years later, Saturday Night Fever arrived and detonated across culture. Tony Manero wasn't just a character, he was a symbol. The walk, the white suit, the confidence hiding insecurity, all resonated deeply. The film didn't simply succeed, it dominated. Travolta received an Oscar nomination at an age when most actors are still waiting to be noticed. Then Grease followed, brighter, bigger, and even more successful. Danny Zuko cemented his place as a global icon. At 24, Travolta had conquered Hollywood completely. What no one realized then was that success that arrives too quickly often leaves no time to learn how to survive it. when the narrative suddenly changed. Hollywood's affection can be fleeting, and for John Travolta, it shifted with brutal speed. In the early 1980s, a series of poorly received films altered how the industry viewed him. Projects like Moment by Moment and Staying Alive didn't just underperform, they damaged his credibility. The cultural landscape changed, disco faded, and critics turned dismissive. The same traits once celebrated became reasons for ridicule. Studios stopped calling, roles disappeared. By 30, Travolta carried a label no actor wants, box office risk. Fame that arrived too fast left just as quickly. There was no gradual decline, no quiet adjustment. The fall was public and unforgiving. For someone who had known only extreme success, the silence felt unbearable. Yet this period, painful as it was, stripped away illusion. It forced him to confront identity beyond applause, something his earlier rise never required. The comeback no one predicted. When most believed his career was finished, one director saw possibility instead of nostalgia. Quentin Tarantino offered John Travolta the role of Vincent Vega. In Pulp Fiction, a character far removed from polished leading men, Vincent was flawed, awkward, and deeply human. The choice was risky for both actor and director. Travolta accepted, understanding that nothing safe would revive him. The performance shocked audiences and critics alike. It wasn't flashy, it was grounded. Pulp Fiction became a cultural milestone, and Travolta's comeback entered Hollywood legend. Awards returned, respect followed. He wasn't chasing youth or trends anymore. He was simply honest. That honesty resonated. For a moment, it seemed like he had beaten the odds completely. Hollywood had granted him a second life. What no comeback can protect against, however, is the randomness of personal loss waiting quietly off stage. A loss that changed everything. In 2009, John Travolta faced a tragedy no success could soften. His 16-year-old son, Jet, died suddenly during a family vacation. The loss was immediate and devastating, collapsing his world in ways career failure never had. Acting no longer mattered. Public opinion felt irrelevant. Even flying, once his greatest escape, lost its meaning. Grief consumed his focus, altering priorities permanently. Friends later admitted they worried he might never recover. This wasn't a chapter he could work through publicly or transform into performance. It was private, heavy, and constant. The man who had survived professional rejection now struggled to survive emotionally. Fame offered no comfort, applause had no value. The silence after Jet's death wasn't temporary, it became part of his life. From that moment forward, everything John Travolta chose carried the weight of a father who had lost a child, losing the anchor that held him. Just as life began to find fragile balance again, tragedy returned. In 2020, Kelly Preston, John Travolta's wife and partner, died after a private battle with breast cancer. She had been his anchor, his stabilizing force after Jet's death. Losing her created a silence deeper than anything before. Kelly had held him together during his darkest moments, and without her, the world felt unfamiliar. Public appearances dwindled, interviews became rare. Friends noticed withdrawal, not from bitterness, but from exhaustion. The grief was quiet, layered, and permanent. Travolta didn't disappear dramatically. He simply stepped back. The spotlight wasn't rejected. It was no longer needed. In losing Kelly, he lost the person who made survival feel possible. What remained was responsibility, especially to his children, and the slow realization that some losses don't heal. They are simply carried forward. A life that grew smaller. Today, John Travolta's world is intentionally quieter. He lives away from Hollywood's constant noise, focused on his children, particularly his youngest son, Benjamin. The roles that once defined him now feel distant, like echoes from another lifetime. Hollywood hasn't come calling again, and this time there's no dramatic comeback waiting. Not because he lacks talent, but because the industry rarely grants a third resurrection. Travolta understands this. He no longer measures worth through scripts or box office numbers. His days revolve around presence, routine, and memory. Photographs fill his home, reminders of love that once animated everything he did. The ambition that fueled his youth has softened into reflection. This isn't decline, it's acceptance. A different kind of success, one that values peace over relevance and meaning over momentum after a life spent at extraordinary emotional extremes. The cost behind the smile. John Travolta's story isn't really about fame, failure, or even resilience. It's about cost. What happens when success arrives before identity fully forms? What happens when loss arrives after everything else has already been taken? He didn't just lose a career twice. He lost the people who made success matter at all. His smile, remembered by generations, carries layers the world rarely sees. Fame made the world dance, but it never promised protection. When the music stopped, what remained wasn't emptiness, but endurance. Travolta didn't collapse under grief. He adapted to it. He learned that survival doesn't always look triumphant. Sometimes it looks quiet, withdrawn, and deeply human. At 71, John Travolta stands as proof that applause fades, careers shift, but love and loss leave marks that never disappear, and that truth, more than any performance, defines him now.